Thank you so much, Sable. It is so exciting to be here as a part of Writers Conduit, and especially to participate in believable world building.
If some of this is a little, if you guys have questions or I'm going too fast, please let me know. I tend to talk very quickly.
What made you want to write for kids? This is kind of the icebreaker.
So today what we're going to be covering is we're going to be talking about who can critique and kind of what are the different types of critiquers who are in the world around us.
So, for example, this is Pelagia, homeworld of the Sky Rays.
I've been doing creative writing workshops here in where I live for a long time. It's always been this kind of format where we just set a timer, write whatever based on the prompt, and have to go around open mic and just kind of read what we wrote.
So we're talking about cover art today. Cover art can attract readers or as much as we like to think people won't judge a book by its cover, we know it's true.
As far as I can tell, the best definition of what neurodiversity is any form of differentiation in brain function.
We are here to discuss NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month.
This is the traditional versus independent publishing panel.
I'm really into the academic side of mythology as well as the more fun storytelling side.
When you hit somebody, it makes a distinct sound. If you hit them in a certain place, it makes a distinct sound.
Welcome to Writers Conduit, finding your online community.
Alright, and we are live, everybody. Hello! My name is Eli Clay. I am joined by my good friends Amy Wintersvoss this way. Whichever way.
We're somewhere.
Somewhere. Safa Burnell and Siobhan the writer.
Hello. Hi!
And we are here today to talk to you about mythology in writing. And as you can see over here, I have a list of terms. I hope I'm pointing the right way.
Nice. Down.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So let's start with what we are talking about today. Hang on, I have to grab my assistive device, also known as a tablet. So today we are talking about gods and goddesses, heroes, monsters, legends. Taking the characters and even the stories from mythology is fun, but what should you know about doing that? Are you stuck using the same Greco-Roman mythology? Get the answers to these questions and more from writers of mythology from all over the world and throughout history. No myth is too small for us to explore. So, what is myth? What is religion? What is appropriation? We're going to start with defining our terms, and we recognize that there are multiple definitions for myth, religion, folklore, culture, and appropriation. For the 3 hours of this panel, here are some of the definitions we are concentrating on to narrow our scope.
First, we have myth. And myth, and the plural of which is mythologies, is a collection of myths, especially one belonging to a particular religious or cultural tradition. A set of stories or beliefs about a particular person, institution, or situation, especially when exaggerated or fictitious.
I can't figure out why I'm quieter than everyone else. Anyway, thank you for that, Safa. And I believe you had folklore, Amy.
I did. I picked that one because I like it. So folklore is the traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community passed through the generations by word of mouth. It can be a body of popular myth and beliefs relating to a particular place, activity, or group of people.
And it is worth noting that folklore is community dependent, mythology is tradition dependent. And I believe we are back to Safa for religion.
The religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a deity, a god or gods, a particular system of faith and worship, and a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance.
Huh. I can't figure out. Actually, I have a notion about why I am so quiet. I will be right back. In the meantime, Siobhan,
Culture.
Thank you.
Culture, it's a noun. The arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. A refined understanding or appreciation of culture. The customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. The attitudes and behavior characteristics of a particular social group.
All right.
How's the audio now? Are we?
Yeah, is that any better? That is the best I can do to try and fix it. Unfortunately, well, actually, that's not.
Turn it up in your OBS.
Okay, let's try that. Is that better?
Whoa,
it might be my headphones. Too loud now. Okay.
Here we go. Halle! Yay!
All right. And then finally,
They like it too.
I was not paying the most attention because I was arguing with my air conditioner. Did you finish?
We're on to appropriation.
I did. We're on to appropriation.
Excellent. So, appropriation, a noun. The action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. Or the artistic practice or technique of reworking images from well-known paintings, photographs, etc. in one's own work. So these are the textbook definitions that we are going to be using for appropriation, religion, culture, folklore, and mythology. Not in that order. But yes, these are the definitions that we will be using today. So let's start, because we do have to touch on this a little bit, but keep it brief, with appropriation. So obviously we are all, every single one of us, very white. For the most part, these mythologies are not ours. These folklores are not ours. However, we are treating them as respectfully as we possibly can. And with that said, let us move on. So, yes. Oh, I forgot about this. I was going to try and talk to somebody about this. How do authors from the religion associated with myths feel about mythology in fiction? Did anybody else remember to do their homework?
I didn't.
Just a little. I reached out to some contacts in different religious communities. I think one of the biggest things when you're talking about, for today, especially mythology versus religion, is this a religion currently still being practiced by a significant amount of people in as close to its original form as we can expect with different cultural changes in the world. So as long as we're kind of looking at things as a certain amount of respect, we're taking that example of, is this something that is still being practiced by quite a few people or not? The idea was, well, if you don't know my stories, I don't necessarily want you telling them. But if it's something where it's like, oh, there is a djinn in this for a brief amount of time, and yet it just kind of moves on, and then they were like, well, it's nice to be mentioned, but really, I can give you a bunch of authors that are of this culture, that are of this religion, that have done a very good job in telling very good stories. So maybe kind of make sure you branch out and get a sensitivity reader. But as long as that sensitivity reader was gotten, that was a sense I got from the conversations I had. They're like, so you have a sensitivity reader? Like, you better believe I'm going to do that. Yes, I will.
Sensitivity readers are utilized for so many different things.
Yeah.
Yes, sensitivity readers are worth their weight in gold. Yes.
And there are specifics that certain sensitivity readers will handle. Like there's certain ones that will handle Japanese culture versus other things. And if you can't find one, because there are some aspects that are really hard to find them, ask somebody in the culture to read.
Yes.
So
sorry
if it
about
still
the
exists.
looping. I'm adjusting things so that maybe I will drop less frames. It's worth a shot, right? And did you have anything to add, Siobhan?
The thing is with appropriation is when you're dealing with other authors and cultures and religions, like Sap was saying, make sure you've reached out to them, or you know enough about it that you're not going to mess it up. Because if you mess it up, there's going to be a huge backlash. So if you wanted to write about indigenous folklore or practices, make sure you've got someone there to help you write it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That scans with everything that I know too. And that actually takes us past our next point, which was sensitivity readers. But we have not touched on research. So how do you do your research? Let's start with Amy, because I know Amy there that way.
It's all messed up.
Yeah.
But anyway, for me, I have several Japanese friends because my books focus mainly in a fantasized Japanese, modern, but Japanese mythology. And so I've asked several friends. That was my start. And then another awesome research point for me has been yokai.com. I'll pop that into the chat. Matthew Meyer does awesome in-depth research, and he can read Japanese. I know a little Japanese, so I cannot read it, and he is able to deal with the Japanese, and then some of the Chinese that came into the Japanese culture, and so he does some fabulous research there, and it's an awesome jumping off point. There's also a lot of the books. There's Tales of Japan, Tales of Old Japan, and then there's like a lot of mythologies. There's a wonderful guy named David Chart who is actually he came over, I think he's from Britain. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember his accent, but he is in Japan, now a Japanese citizen, and is part of the Shinto beliefs, or not beliefs, but he documents for particular shrines, and he works with a particular shrine. So there's some really, really good things. His name is David Chart, and he is really, really fabulous. A really good explainer of things. Like he talked about how our idea, the Western idea of gods versus the Japanese idea of the kami is very different, and it's a very hard balance. So those are some of the things that I've done, and I don't want to hog up the time. So try not to geek out too much.
I understand. And how about you, Safa? What are some tools that you've used for research?
I've used as close to primary sources as I can get, so especially for things like Abrahamic traditions, I was working on translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls when I was in university. I was kind of going into sort of some biblical Greek and Arabic, things like that, so that I could get closest to the originals as possible. With Hellenistic cultures, it was lots of pottery and lots of sculpture and looking at, like Linear B from Mycenae, and kind of going to as close as you can, but then recognizing that most of these were either oral traditions or we only have so much.
Right.
We only have, for Hellenistic traditions, we have mostly things that were written from an Athenian perspective. So that's naturally going to color the myths that we've preserved. I use norse-mythology.org when I'm going back to my actual tradition, which I'm part Scandinavian, part Slavic. So I use norse-mythology.org, which is Norse mythology for smart people. There's lots of amazing papers on that. And then when it comes to Slavic mythology, I dive into the academics, because there's only a bit of it. There's only a bit that isn't completely oral. When it comes to West Africa, I have a lot of West African tradition just from my professional career. I've got 20 years of going back and forth from West African nations doing humanitarian work. I rely heavily on the people that I know and love there, my West African family. And when we're talking about, Yoruban myths, or we're talking about, like Mama Ya and Okudumare, and we're talking about certain things like that, I'm going back as close as I can to the original source. I can't just read an article and write about it. I have to try and find as close as I can get to somebody who knows and has followed the practical tradition.
All right. Thank you for that. And then, Siobhan, how is it that you do your research?
Like Sappa says, I like NorseMythology.org for when I do the Norse stuff, but I'm more Celtic focused. So I have a copy of the Mabinogion, and that's as close as I can get to the original, unless I can find people to talk to who are still living in the culture, because a lot of it is Irish and Welsh culture. So reaching out to people in those nations.
Right.
So, and getting their take on it, because a lot of times what we see in writing, is so messed up. There's one author who's done a lot of research into it, and I love her work. That's Cecilia Dart Thornton. Most of her books deal with the Fae in fantasy, and I mean, she's got research out that she has actually put into a like a footnote section, an appendix.
Oh wow!
Of where she found everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
That's impressive.
And she's an Australian author, so. So I use a lot of her work to her resources too.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And for myself, I tend to use more Greek mythology, but I also know a little bit, just bits and pieces of First Nations mythology. When I am doing the First Nations mythology research, I try when possible to go to that First Nations website, and if they have a mythology on their website, that is my source. That is my primary source. If I can get in touch with someone from that tribe, even better. And always, I never use without permission. I always say, hey, I'm an author, I'm doing research, is it okay if I use this myth? If they say no, that's it, I'm done.
Definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me see here. So our next note here is culture behind the story. Context, modernization. Oh wait. Yeah. Context, modernization, or seen through another lens. And I think this is in reference to rewriting myth. So
yeah.
I know
we do have a question that goes along with this from Daz.
Oh yes, I saw that.
Daz has this, yeah. So Daz's question was, how fair game are ancient religions that are mythology and not a current religion for creatives to utilize ... and twist? I think that goes along with culture context.
It does. And that's a complicated kind of question to answer. So what is fair game? Depends on who you ask, from my experience. But let's go to, say, Safa. What's your take on this one?
Okay, so before you recontextualize something like a myth, say, let's go back to something that most of us know, Hellenistic myths, aka Greek and Roman. How do you recontextualize that myth if you don't know the original context and what it meant within that culture? First, you have to go back and you have to research as much as possible that culture, and not necessarily that culture from our viewpoint. I mean, obviously, when we look at the Hellenistic myths, I think it goes without saying a lot of those myths are potentially problematic. Like, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
But that culture, it wasn't problematic. That was what gods did. That was the capriciousness of the universe. So how do you first take it where it's at and then see what you can do from there? See what you twist and bend so that you can get it to a slightly different lens or perspective. Or, with Mesopotamian myths, you've got the saltwater goddess Tiamat, and you've got the freshwater god, and then eventually they end up getting carved into little bits by their children because they got upset about stuff. Well, how do you recontextualize the vilification of a figure like Tiamat in Mesopotamian myth without thinking about the incredible misogyny that happened in the culture? You have to first take it where it is, and then you can start layering on top of it. Then you can start kind of finding where you want to make changes and to kind of take things in a new expression. But you got to do your research first.
Yeah. And how about you, Siobhan?
Well, when it comes to the myths and whatnot, like I said, most of my stuff is dealt in the Celtic tradition. Right. The other thing I forgot to mention earlier was I actually utilize archaeological programs from stuff like that, because and the problem is with archaeology is if they don't understand it, it's religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they don't understand it, it must be for religious purposes.
Or not
this
important.
Must be a temple.
Or not important.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
spinning. So
for taking them and remodernizing, right? Like it's all cultural. You start with the culture of the time, not what we have now. Then you have to see how it would change over time if you're trying to modernize it. What if this culture had stayed through? How would it be now? Is it as prevalent, or has it faded in? Like, has it paled in comparison? These are all ideas to consider.
Yeah. And what do you think, Amy?
Considering what I write doesn't
practical
fit
application than most of us, but
yeah, so I don't know if I can really apply to more of an ancient culture, but I was thinking of trying to, everybody, Safa and Siobhan have talked about taking an older culture to a new, but what if you take a new person to an older culture, and how many misunderstandings are you going to have there? And that could be a really, really fun aspect. So again, you have to know the culture. You have to know how the person would react to the culture, and could they fit in ever? So
it's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah, it brings up a lot. It brings up the evolution of culture in and of itself. The evolution of a story from, a lot of what we see in Europe come from an Indo-European root. Like, they come from an original root, which appears, at least from the research I have done, to have originated closer to India and then to kind of come up and swoop throughout Europe. So when you look at it that way, you're seeing all these parallels between, like, Hercules, Thor. Are they similar characters? Are they basically a nurtured change from people that were no longer in a Mediterranean environment, and thus, instead of hell being hot, the underworld was cold?
Right.
You know, you have to think of it that way too. So what changes are you enacting upon that original base culture, that you're going to have those morphologies, those differences, those things that are naturally going to morph. And then I'll say this and I'll shut up. Promise. Also recognizing that most mythology, and especially folklore, was oral.
Yes.
It's like a game of cultural telephone. So you can have like 17 different versions of the exact same story, and all of them are slightly different. And the answer is which one's the real one? The answer is yes.
Yes, exactly. And there are several, just off of the top of my head, especially more Slavic-based countries where a lot of the mythology has unfortunately been lost, and all we have left is the folklore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or one of my, because I love watching, on yokai.com again, because I can't read a lot of the things and I try to get as close to the source as I can. He gets to go and talk to people from different areas, and then he compares all of these different little yokai creatures, and this one's a variant on the kappa here, and it's really, really fun to see how many variations there are, but they're all there. They're all the thing, and it's really, really fun.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Should we move on to the next point or the next question, possibly? Or we have another one.
Yes, we've got 2 questions waiting now.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's do SL Funk's question. When it comes to writing original characters, that unintentionally share some aspects with mythological creatures or figures, do you continue to research and reach out to sensitivity readers even though the original concept wasn't meant to be connected to the figure/creature? That's an interesting question. Ooh, Amy's got this one.
Can I? I have a take. I'm sure everybody will have a take. When you hadn't meant it to and you find out it did, find a way to make it unique. Mm-hmm. Find a way to make it yours. So.
Yep.
Anyway.
And what's your takes, Siobhan?
If it's an unintentional thing, you could always put a disclaimer at the very front of your book or story. All characters in this do not resemble any known mythological creature, mythological person living or no person living or dead or mythological. Even though, but yeah, I would agree with Amy as well. Tweak it so it's not quite as close.
And how about you, Sappho? What do you think?
Number one, I think Amy's right on. Number two, I think we have to recognize that we as a species are a member of the collective creative unconscious. So there are going to be certain things in the zeitgeist, certain, we call them tropes, but you could also call them archetypes, things that are going to be present in a lot of fiction because it matches with a lot of people's experience. Now, when we're talking about like monsters and deities and certain things, what culture doesn't have some form of figurative figure for the sun, for the moon? So we're going to see parallels to certain things. I think the decision needs to be made. If it's something that your readers are being like, dude, have you seen this? Do you realize that every single beat of this is making me think of these vibes? Well, then it's your choice whether or not to modify or to own it and do some research and just remember that, again, we're all members of this wonderful collective consciousness. We're all, and I say that in a Jungian archetypal standpoint, we're all members of this species that have amazing stories. What's different is your voice, your authentic voice. Find ways to modify or double down, but make it yours, make it your authentic voice. And I mean, unless somebody comes to you, multiple people come to you and go like, I'm sorry, that's a little, that's a little really close to this potentially problematic thing. Oh, okay. I better go look at that.
Yeah.
Full stop. Ho.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just it. When you get, it's like one person, okay, that's fine. 3 people, time to look at it.
Yeah.
One person.
Where's the editing?
Okay, whatever. 2 people. 3 people. Okay, fine. I'm gonna go find out.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed something here.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have sometimes you have trusted people that,
Mhm.
it's not always, sometimes that one person is your trusted person. You're like, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
I believe.
I mean,
yeah.
Like Sapa was saying, most cultures have the representation of like a sun god, but all cultures of the world have a dragon.
Yes. They might not call it a dragon, but it's a dragon.
Right.
We love you.
My raptor
yeah.
arms.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sapa, the house sauropoda member.
Yes. Oh yeah, I just realized we have 4 of the Game of Tomes houses in here, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we got.
Well,
I need to get some
two houses, a
B-wings.
cartel, and a
Yeah, 2 of the
We're on
cartels.
yellow and green eyeshadow, but
Yeah, you better not be talking smack there, Eli.
No, I'm not talking smack.
And the funny thing is,
Wait. Hang
Uh-oh,
on.
uh-oh.
I am Bunny.
Speaking of creating mythologies for your own work.
Yeah, speaking of
Game of Tomes. See, there's an example. So there is one more question there too, but did that help? I'm hoping that.
I'm hoping that helps. Did that help, SL Funk? I hope that helped.
Estelle said in the chat that thank you so much for the feedback. So
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Another question there.
I need some water before we answer the next question.
Good idea. Hydrate.
Coffee. About an hour and a half from now, you guys will be lamenting the fact that I have been given coffee.
Oh.
The Scandinavian apologizes for nothing.
Canadians apologize for everything.
Speaking of apologizing for things, I noticed that the stream is intermittently freezing. Are we still being heard when it is frozen? This is the important question. I'm going to wait on this answer because...
Well, I mean, if you look at my background, it fits perfectly with my house, too.
Okay, we are still being heard. Good. Thank you, Des. That's the important part.
I'm going to delete the
Voices
question.
are fine.
There we go.
Okay, it's just the video that's stuttering. All right. Where were we?
The Angstase question.
The Angstase question? Okay. Let's see here. How important is it to adapt historical lived experience from when the myths were a reflection of their reality for the comfort of modern readers? For example, how do you say this word?
Fascinus, I think, or Fascinus.
Okay. The fascinus might be a protective token for little Roman boys, but depicting one on a child's neck might bother contemporary readers. Yes. Okay, I know what this is now. Yes, I know what this is.
Yeah, that's something that doesn't translate. It's like Priapus does not translate into modern culture without one heck of a warning.
No. Who wants to take this one? If anybody, if nobody wants to take it, we can skip it. But
is it one of those that is best answered in the Discord?
It might be one that's best answered in the Discord. I think yes. Angstase, we will answer this in the Discord because I'm not sure this is covered by Twitch terms of service.
Yeah, and I don't know if it is considered PG-13. So there's the Discord.
Yeah.
And I have to think about it. You know how I have to kind of take a minute, Angst. Very well, because Angst is in a lot of critique streams. I have to actually think about that one a little bit harder because I don't want to give false information. But I would, on the how important scale, I mean, it's starting to kind of, it's one of those, it depends, yes, no, maybe.
Purple?
Probably depends on the audience too,
Yeah.
And what time period you're writing in. Because if you're writing in that time period, it would be normally fine. But
so what is your audience? If you're writing for children,
Yeah, no.
If you're ready for grown-ups, they don't care.
Yeah, I
Some
guess
might.
that informed audience, you can go deeper and into more of the original context and original culture when you have an informed readership who know what they're coming in for, as opposed to somebody who's like, oh, look, it's a cool thing with fairy stories. It's like, you have not read Hans Christian Andersen. Oh my gosh, do not give your child The Little Mermaid. Like, back away. Don't do it. Just watch the Disney version. Like, oh my gosh, abort. Like,
yeah, Hans Christian Andersen, the Brothers Grimm.
Oh gosh, the Grimms were great, but also terrible.
There's a reason it's called the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah. The Lamia. So talking Roman, one of the first stories for children that was actually written for children was a folklore story in Roman culture called the Lamia. And it was about this like woman-headed monster conglomerate that would eat little children if they were bad. Like, that was at one point literature for children, but it was very graphic and very like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the purpose of it?
Old school children's stories. Well, they were spicy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
All right, we're going to take a brief break from questions. We're in fact going to take a brief break in just a few minutes, but do you think we have time to go into why do you want to use myth, or should we take the break now?
Let's take the break.
Let's take the break. We will be back with why do you use myth in fiction. But in the meantime, please enjoy this small commercial break. Hang on just a second here.
Thank you so much, Sable. It is so exciting to be here as a part of Writers Conduit, and especially to participate in believable world building.
If some of this is if you guys have questions or I'm going too fast, please let me know. I tend to talk very quickly.
What made you want to write for kids? This is kind of a nice break.
So today what we're going to be covering is we're going to be talking about who can critique and kind of what are the different types of critiquers who are in the world around us.
So, for example, this is Pelagia, homeworld of the Sky Rays.
I've been doing creative writing workshops here where I live for a long time. It's always been this kind of format where you set a timer, write whatever based on the prompt, and then go around open mic and just kind of read what we wrote.
So we're talking about cover art today. Cover art can attract readers or repel them. As much as we like to think people won't judge a book by its cover, we know it's true.
As far as I can tell, the best definition of what neurodiversity is any form of differentiation in brain function.
We are here to discuss NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month.
This is the traditional versus independent publishing panel.
I'm really into the academic side of mythology as well as the more fun storytelling side.
When you hit somebody, it makes a distinct sound. If you hit them in a certain place, it makes a distinct sound.
Welcome to Writers Conduit, finding your online community.
Okay, now we're live.
Hey,
we're back.
Did you miss us? I know I missed us.
Yeah, but my aim's getting better.
These days to be right in the bullseye.
All right, as promised, we are back with why do you use myth, and when is it better to create your own? I believe it is Siobhan's turn to start.
Why do I use myth? Because a lot of the creatures in my writing are based around mythological creatures. But I have made them my own. When is it better to create your own? When you've got nothing to base anything on. But you have to make sure you've got an idea on how you want to create it.
Yep.
Like I've got my Percivet, which are technically a type of griffin, but completely different creatures mixed together. They are a corvid and raccoon based griffin, not a cat, like a great cat and raptor.
As we all take a hydrate.
Yeah. Sounds I missed my coffee moment.
All right, and how about you, Sappho? Why do you use mythology, and when is it better to create your own?
Okay, so I write 2 series. I have my Lieben cycle, which is cyberpunk, and then I have my magical realism series called Judge of Mystics, which incorporates a lot of world mythologies, including figures like Ares, the Queen of the Fae, Horus. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then just a ton of Norse mythology. So I am very guilty of kind of taking and sobering. For me, especially when it comes to Ares and Aphrodite, when it comes to the Hellene myths, I just kind of want to fill in the blanks of what it would have been like to see Ares more from a Spartan or Roman gaze than an Athenian gaze, where he was enemy number 1. Oh my gosh, get him out of here. Somebody lock him in a jar and throw away the wax covering because there was no key. It's a jar. But I wanted to take that story and to see what it would look like from a perspective of Ares being the embodiment of a courageous man. How does that change? How does it change when we see that Ares was the only, depending on the myth series you're looking at, one of the only Hellenistic gods that was actually standing up for the rights of people underneath them, aka children and women? What do you do? What do you do with that? That story was lost. We lost a lot of that because a lot of the Spartans didn't write anything down. They were too busy, wrestling in the mud. I don't blame them, but I would have liked a story or two. So I do a lot of that in the Judge of Mystics series. And then when it comes to the Fae, for me, I wanted to do something completely different. So instead of it being the Fae, I created a species of basically sentient and sapient plants. And so they are literal trees. They are literal roses. They are literal things, but they're in humanoid form because I wanted to investigate seeing a form of closer to the Slavic folklore and the Norse folklore that I was given as a child, closer to certain lesser deities and lesser spirits that nobody really talks about. So I created this kind of sense of pixie-like, fae-like. I have different terms and things like that as well, but embodiments of nature as plant life. And then how does that affect your story? And you're a plant, a sentient plant, a sapient plant. How does that affect the psychology of that thing? I found that fascinating. My hand is in the Aurora Borealis.
The wonders of Zoom.
All right, and how about you, Amy?
For me, why did I want to use myth? It started when I went to Japan in 2017. God, I want to go back. I tried to go back. And we had a chance to visit all of these wonderful shrines and temples, and I wanted to know more. And a year later, I was like, I want to go back. I want to go back. I want to go back. And I had no cash, no way of going back. And it was a wonderful chance to dig into the culture and have questions to ask to my friend in Japan, where we've been chatting back and forth for like 10 years now, or more than 10 years. It's just a fabulous way to dig into her culture and, hey, what about Amatsu, or what about Inari, or what about, and it's just a great way to connect with the culture, because for Japan, where I focus on, it's still a living mythology and folklore, and so it's I get to ask people about it, but there are some things that I can't really go back and read, so there's this historic and modern thing, and I can ask how things have changed. So then when is it better to create? I don't know if it's always necessarily better, but for me, I tend to find holes in things. Like my favorite example is where we have the kitsune. They're these fabulous shapeshifters, and a lot of times they shapeshift into these beautiful women who are seductresses. And what about the guys? I mean, where are the guys? There are some you find in the mythologies, but not many. Most of them seem to be women, and it could be male foxes shape-shifting into women or not, but it depends on how much of a joke they're playing on their intended victim. But really, you don't see very many male foxes in there. And so I filled in. I'm like, maybe they're rare. Maybe there's more girls born, And so it's just a fun way to kind of fill in. And that's where I get to have a niche, and that's where I get to make my own mythology. So
I mean, that's a lot like the Irish Selkies, the seal women, technically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. You don't see many male Selkies either.
Nope.
Very rare. As for myself, I use mythology because I grew up with mythology. That was my first stories, was like Raven stealing the sun, and Hans Christian Andersen, which probably, okay, scary stuff. Grim fairy tales. They started me off with the dark stuff when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, I mean,
some light. I mean, Raven stealing the sun. It's not much nicer than that one, to my mind. There are other ones, but I can't remember. ADHD memory is a thing. But when I went to start writing mythology, for the most part, I have decided to create my own, because I look at the gods and goddesses that humans have created and go, wow, that's okay. And I kind of like to make my own mythologies, because it gives me room to be able to say, okay, so if I was a person making mythology today, what would I want from my gods? I would want them to be a little less yikes, and a little more human. All right.
And that's an interesting thing to say too, because when you look at the kind of the morphology of a religion or a mythology from its beginnings all the way through, it usually starts with this almost like not even a personification, but just this kind of cosmic force. You've got a chaos force. You've got something that's there's these huge forces, think of actual chaos, think of, certain things. And then they slowly humanize and personify as they develop, as they go. So the beginnings of something are going to be more of that sort of like totemic, large, unknowable force. And then as you keep going, all of a sudden you've got, the Olympians overtaking the Titans, more human and more human as you go. So that really, from a psychology of myth, it tracks that we would want to see our deities becoming more and more like us, more and more human and humane.
Yes.
You know, less capricious, less, and the more we control our world, how much more is our myth going to change so that our deities or those heroes that we looked up to are more compassionate, more merciful, and more humane, rather than expressions of a chaotic world that we are just praying that something can solve,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Though there is sometimes a pull for trying to find something more unknowable and make it feel a little more almost alien, for lack of a better way to describe it. It's got to be interesting and different too. So
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's take a question here. I have a question from Story Girl. A lot of fantasy historical fiction can be deeply influenced by culturally relevant. I feel like this is Department of Redundancy Department. A lot of fantasy historical fiction can be deeply influenced by culturally relevant mythologies. Let's go with that. But I don't think we've discussed retellings of mythological stories in other settings. For example, urban fantasy, sci-fi. I'd be keen to hear the panel's thoughts on that process.
Can I answer this one?
All right. Let's start with Safa because Safa hasn't gone first in a while.
Well, Story Girl, I do basically exactly that in the Judge of Mystics series. So I am very aware of kind of retelling things in a modern idea. What I did say, I'll go back to Ares just because that's the first one off the top of my head. I can talk about Thor all day, but what I did with Ares, and I had his development of what would happen, 3,000 years later, 2,000 years later, even, 800 years later. Where is he now? Where did he go with culture? Did he fade out with the rest of his family, or did he find a way to kind of reinvent himself consistently? Spoiler alert, he did, but he also did it by partnering up with the Sons of Thor. So, and it was that sense too, when you were looking at urban fantasy or science fiction, we should look at the motion of people and ideas. Like, ideas don't stay in one place the whole time. There's no such thing as a mythology that is completely bereft of other stories that have come into it at some point, traders or cultural expansion or different things like that. I mean, it's a little bit different. I'm talking more from a Asia, Africa, and Europe perspective here. I don't have a whole lot of expertise in South American or Central American, so that I will leave absolutely to others. I'm speaking within the terms of African, Asian, Middle Eastern, and European there.
Yeah.
But,
all right. And what do you think?
Was Safa done?
Oh wait, was Safa done? I'm sorry.
I can be done. I can shush.
No.
I just wanted to make sure you.
Yeah, well, I think when we're kind of translating things over, I mean, do we do the Stargate approach where Thor is all of a sudden this weird alien guy, or do we do the approach of taking the things that Thor is most famous for, his attitude, his thirst, usually for some form of meat or alcohol. Please use responsibly, kids. Kids, no, none, but adults. Yeah, there we go. Or the things that he had with him, like Mjolnir and his belt of strength and his gauntlets, like the twin rams. What do you take? How do you modernize it? In one of the Judge of Mystics series, Thor, spoiler alert, Thor is going to be showing up using a pair of Dodge Rams slung together with leather thongs that are holding on to the wheels while he's on the back of an RV, on the top of the RV going, yeah, look at me, I'm being modern. Ha ha, I've got a tiny home. Ha ha. Like, it was a way to translate what Thor, who is used to going through the sky, with a pair of rams on a chariot, what would he do now?
Very fun.
I just want to pause real quick and say, hello, Uncle Tobin. Good to see you. Thank you for the raid.
Welcome.
And now I will defer to the wonderful, amazing Amy, who has lots of good information about this.
That makes me feel like I have to say something phenomenal now.
No phenomenal.
You are
I'll try.
phenomenal, so it works.
So I don't so much do retellings, but I like to utilize Japanese myth as it might try to adjust to modern humanity and technology. And could it have really done this? I mean, because like some of their ghosts, their yurei, go through things, you can't, how could they use a computer? And so it's really fun to kind of dig into that and dig into some of, my brain is not Sojobo. What would he do to try to continue to lead his people and yet hide away and be this mystic on the top of a mountain? I mean, how could you do this? And so it's been a lot of fun. I gave him a secret organization, and the Yurei, they have to befriend a human or hire them to be able to use a computer. And so it's really fun to figure out ways that these yokai could modernize, but yet what aspects make it difficult. So
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, well, Storygirl has added one of my works in progress is sort of a modern retelling of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, but the focus is not so much on the gods and characters, but on the themes of the original myth.
That's a good way to do it, in my opinion, is to focus on the themes of the myth more so than the characters and the gods. Yeah.
I think,
what's your take, Siobhan? Or do you have a take on this one?
Most of my stuff is original fantasy, so like historical. So I have no basis for the urban fantasy or sci-fi to really go on, except for things that I've read. But even then, I have, because I haven't written anything like that and I haven't even looked at it, I'm not going to say much about it.
Fair enough. Oh, you have more?
yeah, I forgot one thing I had written down. Terry Pratchett did a fabulous version of this with the character of Death. Was it Reaper Man, where Death has to die and everything gets they're trying to change over to more technological Death. And fabulous book. Highly recommend it. So anyway.
Yes, I was actually going to bring up the Dresden Files. This is in interesting ways, because there's a ton of mythology from all different cultures, as far as I can tell, in the Dresden Files. Basically, all the gods, all of the mythology, it's all real in the Dresden Files. It's just very hush hush. And I had somewhere I was going with this. I have forgotten. If anyone else would like to say what I am trying to think of, please speak up.
I just think it's a wonderful mashup of things, and how you could handle it now, and how you could keep it like hush hush secret. Oh no, this is the secret thing. But then again, mystery cults and mystery religions were all the rage for hundreds, if not 1,000 years.
Yes.
So this idea that we would have something like the Dresden Files, or we would have a modern retelling where oh yes, we keep ourselves secret from the humans and all this kind of stuff. That's just back to the way things were, because you would have these mystery cults where they would keep their knowledge very quickly until you got past the initiation process into deeper and deeper mysteries. Right. And the thing I wanted to say just briefly too was, and I think this goes a little bit onto a question we had earlier too, when we're looking at kind of modernizing a myth, well, there are certain things that people are still handling today. There are certain things that happen to people. There are certain expectations in people's lives. We do have certain parallels that are still relevant today. So if something which is a historical lived experience can be made relevant today because we are still handling and dealing with that issue, then it's a fairly parallel 1-to-1 ratio of dealing with that issue, because we're still human. Even 5,000 years ago, even, more than that, even 10,000 years ago, even the Lascaux cave paintings, we're still human. And there is something that sustains from that time period all the way till now. Like we've changed clothes, we've changed other things, we've changed technology, but there are still some cores to who and what we are. And I think that's the power of myth. Right. We are reminding ourselves both of our differences and where we've come from, but we're also reminding ourselves on how we can change. And what's the same? There's a reason why certain stories are timeless. Hopefully they're, stories that we genuinely enjoy and not ones that make us go, that's the one that lasted.
Yeah, hopefully. That's yeah.
That was so well put. Thank you for adding.
Thank you for completing my thought, because I had lost it. I had just...
I tried to anticipate your will, sir. I just...
All right. All right. Oh, this is an interesting topic that we have come up to.
Oh.
Differing views on gods and goddesses of mythology based on geography and culture. For example, the way modern...
Sappho is...
shoot. I've forgotten... I wrote down Ares versus Athena. I forget what the example was. I know it was something Sappho said.
Yeah, that's the fact that everything was taken from a Athenian type perspective.
Right. The Athenians' view on Ares versus the Spartans' view on Ares, or whoever it was. My brain is a sieve.
Yes. So in a lot of what we have left of certain myths from a Hellenistic perspective, well, especially specifically from a Greek perspective, we've got, Linear B from Cretan and Mycenae, but after that, we've got most of it, and I'm saying that most with a quotation mark, most of it, because you're always going to have somebody that found something else. You're like, yes, thank you. Is from an Athenian perspective. Athens, of course, had a patron goddess, Athena, who was both, wisdom and war and, productivity and a whole bunch of different aspects within Athena. And Athena was, of course, the favored child of Zeus, the child from his first marriage, and although, that marriage didn't end well, but, she was still this lauded, look at Athena. She's obviously this, she's hot potatoes, except in this case, she's hot olives. Ares, however, was the favored god of the Spartans and certain other places within the Greek world, because Ares, in what we do have, either you see it from the Athenian perspective where he's the worst thing in the world and everybody hates him and they're like, go away, Ares, go play with your little tin soldiers, like, oh my gosh, please just leave me alone. But to the common man, and I'm talking the gender binary here, the common male within that culture, they couldn't pray to Zeus. They were not worthy enough. They were not kings or princes. They were not lauded men. They would pray to Ares. So really you have Ares, who was this figure of the common man, and the common man who enacted vengeance on anyone that touched their wives or daughters. So, of course, when you look at the Hellenistic myths, when you're only seeing it from the Athenian perspective, Ares looks like the worst thing in the world. But then to others, Ares eventually, in the Roman age especially, became an incredibly lauded god. And yes, Eli, wasn't Athena birthed from Zeus's skull? Yes. Now, Zeus had a wife, Metis, in a lot of the myths. And then it was prophesied that her son would overthrow Zeus. So he ate her.
Yep. And
then started complaining of headaches.
And then he birthed Athena out of his head.
Fully gowned and completely adult and never having to go through puberty or childhood. So you're right.
Mythology be weird, especially Greek, but all of them.
Yeah, but Zeus was almost eaten by his father.
That's true.
His father kind of ate all the rest of the kids, and then
like all of the other kids.
Until Stone Soup, but
yeah.
But yeah, But yeah, so you're right. Yeah, Athena was birthed from Zeus's skull, but that was because Zeus ate his first wife.
Yeah, that's just one of the many yikes about Greek myth is eating your children.
Japanese myth too. I mean, well, not necessarily children, but you know, the ogres eat everything.
Oh, you mean the Oni?
Trolls?
Yeah, the ogres are translation. Yeah, ogre. Yeah, Oni.
Yeah. Or you have, trolls in Norse myth. Oftentimes trolls had where, they used skulls for drinking cups, and they had the skin of men that they had eaten as their tapestries in their caves. Like,
sounds like the Fomorians from the Celtic.
I think there's some
Lovely
parallels
stuff.
there,
Yep.
Yeah.
Every culture, as far as I am aware, has a myth related to eating people, and it's like, but why? I know why.
What was going on? Yeah. What was going on in culture that this is where you went with it? Like, the blood offerings for different cultures within, a Mesoamerican kind of view. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's
not only that, you've got the cannibalistic peoples in other parts of the world, because they think that eating the body or the bodies of their enemies gives them the strength of their enemies.
Yeah.
The mana.
And the knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
May I add to the differing views?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Again, going back to my love of foxes and kitsune, if I compare the Japanese myth to the Korean myths, they're vastly different, but they also, there's some things that are the same. So if you look at the Japanese one, usually they're fairly harmless. They'll be tricksters. They can change shape into a usually beautiful woman. But they don't do a lot of harm, usually. But if you look at the Korean side, and the Korean and Chinese, but I don't know the Chinese word for it, the gumihome or the kumihome, and I'm probably not enunciating it right, they would change into a beautiful woman seductress to hunt men and eat their livers and heart and things like this. And that was, I think it has to do with a lot with the fact that foxes are scavengers, but it's just interesting to see that very, very close cultures had very different views on the fox temptress. So it was just kind of fun to look at the differences. So
yeah. And speaking from a Slavic standpoint, because I have done quite a lot of research into Slavic folklore and mythology, internet research, but it exists. There are the Rusalka and the Mavka, I think it is the other one that I'm trying to think of. It starts with an M. Don't quote me. But they're basically the same creature, except one has a very tragic backstory and the other one does not. And it's very interesting because they come from different parts of the Slavic world. The Rusalka is very specifically Russian. The other one that I can't recall the name properly, I believe is Ukrainian. Don't quote me.
Closer down into Georgia and the Ukraine and kind of going towards the Crimean, And you see the Rusalka in Poland as well.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Rusalka actually seemed to have because I think they were actually taken with the Norse traders and brought back.
Or possibly by the Vikings. The Vikings did trade through there.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the Norse traders.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
because I mean,
I don't
you
know
have
why
Rus.
that didn't register in my brain.
Because like the Rus were what we would consider now today Swedes. So the Rus ended up going from Sweden into the area now we know as Russia and settled there. So that's why Rus is known as Russia, because they were of the Rus. They were originally, some of them, at least genetically and originally, were Scandinavian.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember where Baba Yaga comes from.
That's Slavic.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
It's
Yeah.
And that's another one of those flesh-eating.
Yeah, that was the Kiev Rus, I believe.
And that one's interesting because Baba Yaga is not just a cannibalistic quote unquote witch. If you play to her merciful side, if you go, oh, Baba, let me do your laundry. Baba, let me clean your place. Baba, let me do your dishes. Baba, let me cook for you. Baba, let me make myself useful to you. She can often be merciful, and then you do her chores, and she gives you a wish and sends you toddling on your way. And then you go, oh, thank God. And you run home as fast as you freaking can and never go back to that part of the forest again.
Yep.
Except her hut has been known to move, so you can actually end up running into her again.
Yeah.
You hear the chicken going, you just run. Or the mortar and pestle.
The paper I'm giving you to Baba Yaga. Yeah. Oh boy.
Oh yeah. My spouse is too.
Interesting enough, there are
question there.
There are babas in Japanese too. It's interesting how they might kind of migrated. So anyway,
I'm going to answer this one as the resident First Nations. My thoughts on the Wendigo are do not.
Do not,
because the indigenous people have asked people not to.
Yes, this is exactly why. They have said, please stop stealing our culture. You're getting it wrong. Just don't.
Yeah, specifically about the Wendigo.
Yes.
Yeah, well, because it's to them, you don't say it, and you have if you're going to write about it, you just please don't.
Just don't. That is our thoughts. Is just don't.
And part of the reason is because people get it wrong, and the Wendigo is actually a very dark part of the mythology that they don't want brought up.
Yes. Yes. We did have another question. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. Isn't it only fair to have mythological super beings treating humans as humans treat other animal species? I don't know that I agree with that.
I mean, I know that pertained to our conversation about like all of the eating of people kind of conversation. I think that was more of a tongue in cheek about that. But I think we tend to reflect what our stories on things that we're handling and dealing with in ourselves. I think that from a personal level, obviously as a writer, but I also think that as a cultural level, we tend to focus on stories that are either attempting to answer or evade some question that we've been really holding on to for culturally for a very long time.
Yeah.
So when we look at the question of, the treatment of animals and the treatment of humans by supernatural beings, I think the question more is, what does it make us think of the reflection of ourselves rather than the reflection of kind of animal life? Although most cultures did start with some form of animism.
Yeah, most
as a religious thing.
Yep.
Well, and how do you make something appear more superior unless it can dominate humans? I'm not saying necessarily treat us like animals, but there's got to be some domination if it's superior, for lack of a better way to describe it.
But I mean,
or supernatural help. Like it's either the domination or it's the here, let me get you out of this bind that you couldn't possibly get out any other way. Like
if your supernatural being is a not good guy in your story, do whatever you want. But if you want them to appear as a good person, think about it.
Yeah, I mean the other thing to consider. One thing with the Celtic stories and whatnot is they always had the 3 trials.
Right.
Right, and in order to succeed, you actually the person who's going through these trials would have to either demonstrate high intelligence, high capability, or supreme humility. They had to humble themselves to people who they would consider their lessers. Otherwise, they wouldn't make it through.
Yeah. Reminds me of Thor, Loki, and Thor's human helper, using that in quotations, who went to the land of the Jotun. You know, they went to Jotunheim, and then they ended up going into the the kind of the Innengard of the Jotunheim, that sort of inner guarded place, which is a huge thing in a lot of Norse mythology. You have Innengard, Utengard, you've got that sense of Innengard order, Utengard disorder, but and there were again 3 trials.
Yep.
There was that sense of 3, and each one of them was to undergo 1 trial, and again, it was that same thing. It was, one was courageous, one was humbling, one was capability. There was.
Yeah.
It's so fun to see those parallels. It's just so fun.
But I like Conquest Publishing has said, the Inuit designated the powers of good and evil to deities. But shaman, I think, use spirits to talk to the gods.
Right.
Yeah, most shamans are an animistic tradition.
Yeah. More of an interface via animism to link to the gods. Yes.
Yes.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah, I mean, I am a practicing druid, which means in all technicalities, I'm a shaman. It's just a Celtic type shaman. Yeah. I will listen to the animals around me. And it is so weird sometimes when you do that, because, I mean, they say ravens are the messengers of evil or death or the mystic, but they're the messengers. And I'm always have ravens around me.
Yeah. And I think that particular stereotype for ravens comes more, not necessarily from the Europeans, because I know there were First Nations that saw them in a similar light.
Yep.
But it is more of a European view than it is almost anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think of the ravens in Norse, Hug and moon, and literally thought and memory, and they're not they're not just 2 birds that were flying around showing out in the ropes. It's that outward expression of the hugur. It's that sense of of spirit. And then what makes up that hugur, what makes up that spirit? And you've got memory, and you've got thought, you've got that kind of thought and wisdom, and then the connection to memory. And only when both of those pieces are in place, the same as, if Odin is going to go sit on his throne and see throughout the 9 realms, well, usually in a lot of the myths, Frigg had to be beside him. You had to have certain, you had those dualities in place in order for the rest of everything to be less chaotic and more, I'm losing the word here, but more kind of synergistic.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I mean, in the Celtic, you've got the Morrigan, which is usually shown with the ravens, and they are the ones that led you to battle. Or decide, I mean, it's like the Valkyrie, the decider, the choosers of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ravens, if they came to a battlefield, there's going to be a lot of death.
Yeah.
They acted similar to vultures in other parts of the world.
Scavengers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. How do they view ravens or similar type birds in Japan, Shai?
It depends, and I haven't read, as many of the stories as I would like, but usually you get like the Tengu, who are going to be they're tricksters, but not as many often shapeshifters, but they're gruff, they're loud, they're rough. When they trick hard. I tend to think of like that, but I don't know of other ones off the top of my head. But yeah, I love the Tengu because they're just of the Japanese culture. they're gonna say whatever the heck they want, and I can very much identify with them.
That's the other thing too, is ravens are actually considered tricksters for most of the
Yeah.
North American cultures.
Yeah, most
But they were still considered tricksters in some parts of Europe too.
Yeah. In North American mythology, almost every single First Nations tribe has a myth about ravens as tricksters. Now, sometimes it's not ravens. Sometimes it's rabbits or squirrels, or you get the picture. But
Or magpies.
Magpies. Yeah, magpies was common too. But for the most part, they viewed them as tricksters. Now, whether or not it was a good kind of trickster or a bad kind of trickster, that depended. That was very... Yeah. These are not separate. Or these are separate. These are not together.
Yeah.
I see Sappho wanting to say something.
Oh no, that was just me separating.
She was animating your words.
Yeah, that was just...
No, these are not together. Yeah. We do not fit together. We are separate.
I mean, and if you think about it, it makes sense. Sorry, I'll say one thing and then I'll shut my mouth. Ravens. Oh, skull. That's right. Caffeinate me more. That's it. That'll save the situation.
Hey, Chris.
Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
You think of ravens. Humans being creatures of pattern recognition, we seek out intelligence. Ravens are incredibly intelligent. They use tools.
They are very smart.
So many things about ravens are just so incredibly well-minded. So of course, we would search out, we search out for dolphins, we search out for ravens, we search out for elephants, we search out for those beings which share a certain amount of intelligence we can recognize in problem solving. So of course, then we would use an animal that has this amazing mind in our stories, and we would put significance upon them because we are looking at them in a way that we're not necessarily going to look at a
mouse,
a songbird, or a mouse.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, most corvid, like all corvid, know how to use tools.
Yeah, that's true. And most of them have the ability to recognize facial features, and
and it's the scientific.
Done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, another creature that is very highly intelligent, and people do not like them, is raccoons, because they're problem solvers.
I love raccoons, actually. I think
so
they're
do I.
adorable.
Yeah, they do.
You could make them play video games.
Yeah.
They've got the thumbs and everything.
Also, I feel so bad for finding this hilarious, but there is a video somewhere out there on the internet of a raccoon with a little bit of candy floss, and they put it in water and it dissolves.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I feel so bad, but it's hilarious.
But we'll give them more.
Yes,
exactly. And think about it. My procivid are corvid raccoons.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how intelligent they are.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to get into every garbage can in the entire history of everything.
Yes.
There will be no chest. Yeah.
Trash panda and scavenger. Hello.
Yeah.
If you lost something, they will find it, and then they will keep it because it is shiny.
But maybe we should get back on track.
Yeah, maybe we should go back to mythology. Let's see here.
Where was the track we were on?
I have no idea.
We were still on differing views on gods and goddesses of mythology based on geography and culture.
We could move on to how to take characters or base characters off myth and legend. Unless anybody else has something to add to this one.
I mean, if you want to see another example of how culture can change a story, just look at the similarities between Thor and Heracles or Hercules.
Yeah.
Or Thor and Lu.
Or Thor and Lu, yeah.
Yeah. Take a look, there are tons of figures, people are like, oh, Zeus, he must be, blah, 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 blah. Well, Zeus and Odin, this and that. Yeah, keep looking. Like,
yeah,
we can track, Aphrodite can be tracked down to Inanna, can be tracked down to that first kind of primordial idea of fertility and love.
Aphrodite, Inanna, Istar, Isis,
Yeah.
Brigitte.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when the Romans found the Norsemen, did they not say that Odin was Mercury, also known as Hermes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Odin's more the trickster.
Exactly.
And they took Frey as Aphrodite.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, Freos.
Romans,
yeah.
That's all I'm going to say there is Romans.
Romans. I mean, they worshipped Ares. What the heck? Well, Mars. What the heck? They also worship their rulers, because you got to watch out for that one. Oh, look, you're an emperor. You must be a god. What is this? Egypt?
Japan. Hello.
Yeah,
China.
Egypt, Japan. Yeah.
Actually,
name a culture where it didn't happen.
Didn't they? The whole,
a lot of cultures
did.
did.
No,
I mean,
no dear.
Hot take: Queen Elizabeth II is the head of the Anglican Church. How much has actually changed?
That's true.
Hot take.
The other thing too is the Pope for the Catholic Church. Not much different.
Yeah.
And you can take the Pope from the Catholic Church and actually go further back into Roman behaviors and Roman traditions, because that's where they got them.
Mm-hmm.
They changed the window dressings and went, oh, look, we're all clergy of this other guy now. Yay. Like, a lot of, you can actually take a look at that and track some of those traditions that you don't see in the biblical scriptures straight back to the Roman form of worship in 380.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Another hot take, but
Yeah. Maybe we should get away from the hot takes a little
yeah.
bit.
I say that as somebody whose spouse is a member of the Orthodox Church. So, and somebody who's actually, academically
studied
that, yeah.
Yeah. Has done research, like the real kind, not the internet kind.
It's just larger sources.
That's true.
Be careful. Queen Lizzie too is clearly a lizard person. Well, she is in her 90s and she's still vibrant.
Clearly lives. Yeah, hey, she's looking good. I mean, whatever sunlight they've got, that. Okay, I'll stop now.
All right, so how do you take characters or base characters off of myth and legend? Let's hear. Who haven't we heard from much recently? Let's go with Amy. It's been a while.
Okay, I've mentioned a couple of these, but I'll kind of try to go a little bit more into like what I've done with Sojobo. Try not to tell too much of the story for book 2, but Sojobo, traditionally, he's a hermit and he's the king of the Tengu. There's 2 different kinds of Tengu. He's the greater Tengu, looks a little more human. The lesser Tengu are the more bird people. And he's a hermit. It's hard to find him. So what I did was I made him a leader of a secret society that watches over Japan, because they've got to modernize, and so much of their culture is being threatened by humans
outsiders?
And things like this. Well, not necessarily. I haven't dealt with the outsider part. I've linked the yokai population to the Japanese population, which is nosediving. And so they have to find a way to stay relevant, to stay around, to help the people, but yet not be harmed by them, because a lot of times yokai were hunted. Different kinds of, yokai were, and it was, a lot of stories, people go kill the Oni or whatever, But for Sojobo, I made him not just the king of the Tengu and able to call in people from anywhere, his people from anywhere, but I based him kind of centrally in Japan, where his mountain would be. I tried to include as much of the historic part, but build on it for a modern society, and where he's struggling because he's thousands of years old and he's like, things haven't changed so much and suddenly they're rapidly changing, and how do we adapt? So I've given him these puzzles, and he's got to figure out, okay, what do we do? Do we bring people into this, or do we keep them out? So that's where I went with Sojibo. And there's a lot of other takes you could take, but if I keep going on, nobody else will get a chance to talk. So I picked one. If there's another turn, I'll pick another one for you guys. So
All right. And eeny meeny. Safa. Wait, that way.
Hey. So, how to take characters or base characters off of myth and legend? Either I look at the rationality behind the character, like what is it that the character in the myth needed to learn? What was their what I would call chronic tension? What was the chronic tension of that story? What is that active tension of that story, that kind of acute tension? So either I would take the motivations and see what would happen if I put those motivations into a different environment, or I would kind of do maybe a fish out of the water thing. What happens if all of a sudden you put, the second you put Aphrodite / Venus / all the other ones that are basically the same woman, into the modern day and give her a smartphone with a bunch of apps on it. I guarantee you we are not ready for that.
No.
Oh my goodness, that I need to, oh my gosh, I need to write that. And then I realized, oh wait, manuscript is sitting there waiting for my editor. I wrote it.
It's like she would go, oh, Tinder, Grindr.
Exactly. Shut up. Like, come on. Like, oh my gosh. Why didn't I have this? Like, it was just like shepherd, olive oil maker, shepherd. Like, it's going to be all over the place, Like, you got to think of it that way too. Yeah, and look at the moral of the myth, but not just the moral of the myth. Let's go back to Orpheus and Eurydice.
Yes.
How many spouses who prematurely lost their spouse would not go to hell and back for them?
Right.
In the middle of their grief. He did not have weapons. He did not have the ability to fight. What does he do? He takes the only thing he has, and that is his gift for song. And he goes down into the underworld and begs with music, with the one gift that he possesses, please give me my spouse. And what happens for the first time, well, like one of the first times, I mean, there's a couple times it happens in Hellenes, but you have Hades and Persephone who are sitting there and they are so emotionally moved by this cry for help. They cut him a deal. Like, how is that not? It's like you could say that without saying any names. Without saying names, you could say that as the log line of a movie or a story, and people would eat it up.
Yes, it's true.
People would eat it. It's something that we can still maintain to this day. That is the compelling story. Now, some other stories, a couple of those maybe, they could
almost
be
anything involving
put them to
almost,
history. But, and like we were talking about in the chat here, think of, Santa had a mean left hook. Look at
that means.
Saint Nicholas. Like Saint Nicholas was an actual person. And in the Orthodox Church, there's a tradition that during the Council of Nicaea, which he was at, and he was one of the people who helped write the Nicene Creed, he got so fed up at somebody who was being blasphemous that he decked the guy. Santa like full on attacked somebody physically, like that. You take that kind of thing of a man thinking that he's doing the best he can for not only the people around him but his faith, and you give him those motivations. That still tracks.
Yep.
Maybe swans don't track.
Not so much.
They don't track. Don't do it. Don't try and be cute. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
But certain motivations, certain archetypal motivations, they still very, very much mean something. So why not explore those stories?
Yeah.
But do it with your voice. And that means renaming something. Maybe that means making an entire mythology where the world starts from, I don't know, a newspaper that got flung at a drain and it started an entirely new universe. Well, make it yours. But those motivations are there and they come from a very real place.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. And what do you think, Siobhan?
Well, how to take care. I mean, a lot of the characters I have are based on, right? I don't really do a lot of characters based on myth and legend. But when I do, it's more of personality over deeds. Because, and I try to find the personality of, I try to research the personality before I even start writing them.
Right.
Because, like, if I were to take Thor, right? He's actually similar to Heimdall being a creator god, and Hephaestus, but nobody considers that. So he is a very studious, very work-oriented type person. He takes his duties to heart. I mean, Lugh is the same, Lugh Silverhand, but he was also a protector god, like Thor and Ares. So I mean, depending on which kind of myth you're looking at, and which so there are times that you could take, okay, I like this from this guy, this from this guy, and this from this guy. Now let's mash them all together and make this particular character. Because this way you've created your own, but it's still based off of myth and legend.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. As for how to take characters or base characters off myth and legend, for me, let me think. I should have been thinking instead of just going, yes, I agree with everything you're saying.
It's been so absorbing.
Wait, what? Yeah. Let me think. So when I go to base characters off myth and legend, because I have taken and done retellings of, for example, the Hades and Persephone myth, which is a whole can of beans I do not want to get into. Like the original one. The retelling, on the other hand, was what if it wasn't what we thought? What if it was not this horrible, horrible story in many cases? What if it was something a little more PG?
What if Persephone wanted to go instead of fighting it?
Yeah, that would be a take. What if Persephone wanted to go? Or the one that I did specifically in Hindsight Being 2020, which is my book with all of the short stories and whatever that I wrote in 2020. The one that I did was she didn't want to go, but by the time she went back, she did.
Yeah, and I mean that's fairly similar to the original original theme too. But I mean, you could also have it. Hades didn't want to take her.
Yeah, that's a take you could take too.
But by the time she had to leave, he didn't want to let her go either, because he'd actually grown to love her, type thing.
And think about it. If we go back to Mycenaean and we go back to Linear B, some of the very first versions of any Hellenistic myth that we have, Persephone is the first chthonic goddess.
Yep.
Not just goddess, is the first chthonic deity, the first deity. And that tracks back also to Mesopotamian, where the first chthonic deity, that first underworld deity, is a female. It also goes back to Japan.
I don't know what chthonic means. Sorry. Can you
underworld.
Help me?
Underworld.
Yes.
Underworld, yeah.
I was like,
yeah, sorry. Pardon me.
Yeah, that'll be the same with the Morrigan or Mav.
Yeah.
For the Celts.
Yeah. And so Persephone was usurped in those myths eventually by first Poseidon.
Yes.
And then later on, Hades.
Yes. In Mycenaean Greece, there was no Hades.
There was no Hades. No, there was Poseidon, because the worst thing that could happen is you drown at sea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Think of what's the worst thing that could happen in the Nordic culture. You freeze to death.
Yeah.
So Helheim is usually portrayed as cold. Yeah. That doesn't mean it was a negative place or a place of punishment. It just means that it was cold. Yeah. You think too of like the video game Hades. If anybody's played that, I love playing Hades. That story, like they did a retelling, obviously, of the Hades and Persephone myth over a long time, and I won't spoil it for anybody who's still playing the game. But their take on it was really cool. That was a neat way to approach Hades and Persephone. Through little snippets every single time you die, because you die a lot playing that game.
You would.
But it's a lot of fun. I like the spear. massive damage. I mean, it's me, of course. I love massive damage, but even in Japan, correct me, but the first underworld deity was also the female. It was Izumi, wasn't it?
No, off the top of my head.
Because there was the two, there was the two spouses, and then somehow she died and then went down to the underworld, didn't? Yeah,
and I cannot remember her name, but there was a dance to try to bring her out, and
Right. I know who.
Yeah.
Sorry,
tired. When she
brain.
came back up, she was a little bit corpsified.
It's
So
about
they
midnight.
it wasn't the same.
It's about midnight
Yeah.
for Amy here.
Yeah.
I think that we should probably likely take a small break and let poor Amy get some tea or something.
I don't dare drink tea. I won't sleep tonight, and I've got stuff going on tomorrow.
Okay, fair enough. But still, we should probably let her stand up, walk around,
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm gonna look this up because it bothers me. I can't
I know, it's
remember.
bugging me too. I'm like, I know.
I
this
said
name.
a something. I'm trying to. Yeah.
It
I
wasn't
know
on
that
my-
the Norse
Izumi
goddess
is
of
not,
hell
isn't it?
was actually hell.
Hell. Yeah. It was hell.
So yes. Let's see. Where are we anyway?
We are near
mythological creatures.
Mythological creatures. You'll wait. This way. Okay, so when we come back from our 7 or whatever minute break, we will be talking about mythical creatures, which should be lots of fun.
I promise no magical dodge rams.
Oh, come on. All right, we'll see you in about 7 or whatever minutes.
Thank you so much, Sable. It is so exciting to be here as a part of Writers Conduit, and especially to participate in believable world building.
If some of this is, you guys have questions or I'm going too fast, please let me know. I tend to talk very quickly.
What made you want to write for kids? This is kind of an inspiration.
So today what we're going to be covering is we're going to be talking about who can critique and kind of what are the different types of critiquers who are in the world around us.
So, for example, this is Pelagia, homeworld of the Sky Rays.
I've been doing creative writing workshops here where I live for a long time. It's always been this kind of format where we just set a timer, write whatever based on the prompt, and then go around open mic and just kind of read what we wrote.
So we're talking about cover art today. Cover art can attract readers or repel them. As much as we like to think people won't judge a book by its cover, we know it's true.
As far as I can tell, the best definition of what neurodiversity is any form of differentiation in brain function.
We are here to discuss NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month.
This is the traditional versus independent publishing panel.
I'm really into the academic side of mythology as well as the more fun storytelling side.
When you hit somebody, it makes a distinct sound. If you hit them in a certain place, it makes a distinct sound.
Come to Writers Conduit, finding your online community.
All right, we are unmuted.
And we're back. And we're both here.
What were we talking about? Mythical creatures. That's what we were talking about. Yes. Yes, mythical creatures.
Mythical creatures. Oh, I know somebody who knows quite a bit about mythical creatures, and they are over there.
Me?
Siobhan. I'm pointing at Siobhan, but I don't know necessarily which way I should be pointing, so I'm
The
pointing
one with
at
the
both.
pen. No.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that way. There we go.
Other.
All right, Siobhan, take us away with mythological creatures.
I mean, when you come to mythological creatures, you start with you got your Greek, your Roman, your Norse, because you've got in the Greek you have your satyrs, your nymphs, and your dryads. The Greek you've got the Roman the Norse, you have elves, trolls, giants, dwarves, gnomes. And when you go into the Celtic ones, you've got all your fairy creatures. Your gremlins, your fae, like your sprites, your pixies. You'll still have elves because they're the she.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there's two courts. The dark she and the light she.
Unicorn.
I'm directly both, and the unicorns are in the Celtic, where the Pegasi are the Norse. Or not Norse, the Greek. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I mean, direwolves come out of the Norse mythology.
That's true.
Something Sappho didn't know?
Oh, no. My personal direwolf, a.k.a. my wonderful rescue dog, Iro, the Jindo. He, right when you said direwolves, he scratched on the door. It was like, direwolves.
I'm here.
Mommy, Iro, the mighty Iro is ready to talk for you. Rawr, 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 rawr. I was like,
the incubi are more of a
those are
incubi are more of a recent thing, aren't they?
No, actually they're not. They are Middle Eastern.
I know, but I thought that they were specifically no. Oh, I am wrong.
Nope,
you're going.
They are a subsection of jinn.
Islamic.
They're a subsection of the jinn.
Yeah, you're going pre-Islamic Arabian for that one. So those are.
Yeah, that one's old. I knew it was old.
Yeah, and you actually have strains of incubi going down to Mesopotamian if you really look.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mesopotamia
like the goddess of night and kind of going.
Yeah, well then if you go into the thing of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? It talks about it. The Mahabharata, I believe it is.
Mahabharata?
That's the one. Talks about the incubi and the succubi and the lamia. Because the lamia were considered the first forms of succubi, if I remember correctly.
Child eating. Look at me. I'm so, Oh, what a wonderful bedtime story. You better listen to mommy, daddy.
Yep.
Otherwise, you just even know, child. Save me, daddy. Not unless you do what you're told. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so when I'm dealing with my mythological creatures, I've taken the original myths of the creature, right? I've taken them, but I've done some modifications to make them my own. Like my dwarves in my stories, right? They all have aprons. They're not always miners or metalsmiths. Anything that deals with an apron. So you've got your innkeepers, your jewelers, your leather workers. Right? I've got giants, but they're gardeners.
Nice.
Yeah, so different than the Jotuns.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's subversively different. Actually, it's basically the opposite.
Yeah,
I love it.
The thing with giants is they're actually in every culture in the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because the giants in the Celtic myths were the ones who I mean, Stonehenge there's 3 myths around its creation. One was it was built by giants. Another was the fact that Merlin took Stonehenge from Ireland and transported it magically.
Oh, wow.
So, and another is the fact that it was just it was the people and the priests, the druids who built it. Like I said, it all depends on what you're looking at and how you're looking at it. So giants are, I mean, yeah, mine are gardeners and clay workers because they're immune to fire. So they're potters.
Yeah, and you're totally right. You know, there's giants everywhere. You know, you go to the Neolithic monuments that we have in Sardinia. You know, you go into some of the oldest records that we have. There are giants, and you think of the Nephilim and Abrahamic traditions.
Yep.
And you know, getting into kind of Coptic Christianity with the Book of First Enoch, basically, which was maintained by the Ethiopian Coptic tradition when it was not maintained by the rest of the Western in Orthodox churches.
Because Gilgamesh was supposedly a giant himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in Norse tradition, the Jotnar were descendants of Ymir, this kind of primordial chaotic figure. And so they were created, they were made at a time before we had the idea of order, before we had that first Inengarth, that first orderly, sequestered kind of, you know, basically fenced off place for society to kind of rest within. Well, everything Utengard, everything that chaotic was of the giants was Jotna. You know, it's so you have these kind of primordial and primeval chaotic forces, which are dangerous and scary, especially when the world is a dangerous and scary place the second you leave the village, the second you leave the protection of your walls.
Yeah. And Eli, or Egrip, goes the island head statues, aka Easter Island.
Yeah, Easter Island.
Easter Island.
The Maori statues on Easter Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The ones that were said to have walked from the quarry to where they are sitting.
Yep.
And it's been proven that people can actually manipulate them to walk them with vines and ropes.
Huh. Cool.
Like I said, I do a lot of study with archaeological stuff. So this was...
Yeah. So Amy, you've been quiet. Tell us about some Japanese
Okay.
creatures.
The creatures, or do we have to stay on giants?
No,
we don't have creatures.
I'd like to branch out. Okay.
What about the sentient umbrella?
yeah, the Tsukumogami. I'd have to look it up how to say it again because my brain is not.
It's late for you. It's late.
Yes, but the creature. So if the umbrellas, the walking canes, the anything that's older than 100 years was supposedly come alive and it would become a yokai. And so, you know, you have your really old rags and you have the discarded cups that were tossed under the house and then they became a guardian of the house. And just really, really fun things. So those are the item things that would become over 100 years old and they'd have a spirit, because everything in Japan has a spirit.
Yep.
The water you bathe in, everything. So
yes.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is because the fact that there were the dragon spirits in Japan, right? You have your air dragon spirit, your earth dragon spirit, your water dragon spirit, your tree dragon spirit.
Dragons in Japan are water related, to my understanding.
Most, not all.
But there are some that are for the others. They're rare, but there are.
I think we're really seeing the influence between China and Japan there too, because a lot of culture from Japan originated, you know, it was brought over from China, especially. Not all, but, you know, there's a lot of cross-reference in some areas, especially with certain socioeconomic.
It's a little of column A, little column B, little column what?
Yeah.
Well, it has to do with the language, and the language of science was Chinese was the first written down language that, to my understanding, there may have been more, but the first official one that was brought over, and it became the language of science. And that's how a lot of the kanji came over. So it was a big influence, and you can hear, if you listen, so some of the similarities.
Well, yeah, both are very tonal languages too, so you got to be very careful when you say something.
Yeah, Chinese is, yes, very, very much so.
Oh, even Japanese, because I was learning it with my child.
Yes and no. There is some.
It's more of like the difference between obasan and obasan.
That's different.
That's not tonal. That's
syllable.
Yeah, it's syllable.
It's a little different. Yeah.
It's
anyway,
not tonal,
yes.
It's stress.
Yeah.
Creatures.
Creatures.
Right.
Moving on. We're not talking language
So
here.
I had mentioned the Tengu, which I love, but there are some really nasty bad aspects to them too, because they would kidnap people and do bad things to them, the rape and things like this. But there are some really fun aspects to the Tengu, and I love some of the parts of the Tengu legends. And they have, as we talked before, they have become nicer and nicer and almost cute in some aspects. And the same with the Kappa, because the Kappa started out eating people and things like this, and then they've been cutified and characterized as like these really cute anime style little creatures, but they're like a half turtle thing that can walk on its legs, kind of a turtle guy with a beak, and supposedly they're very, very good at healing and stuff. And so they're just a really, really fun character. They're some of the most, the Tengu, the Kitsune, and the Kappa are some of the very most popular ones. But some of my favorites are like the Baku, the Dream Eater, who's kind of a chimera of things. He's got this long nose and leopard body and all sorts of fun aspects to him. And he's just such a mashup. Yeah. And supposedly he's this holy thing, but he's just like all the leftover parts of something. So but he eats people's bad dreams. But what he ate kind of has changed over time. But the more modern rendition is that he eats people's bad dreams. So
how do I get one of those?
Usually, a lot of times people will draw one and put it over their bed, and he will come out of the drawing and eat your dreams.
Yeah, it's sort of like similar to the Native American dream catchers.
Yeah.
Similar.
And other cultures, there's they've got little glass orbs that capture evil thoughts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you were saying?
And the Kirin is one I want to learn more about. But he's like kind of like the Japanese unicorn. Mm-hmm. And he's holy and really, really neat. But I want to know more about him. I haven't got to dig into it. But he's like this personification of good. It's like pure and perfect. And I got to draw one because somebody had requested one, and I was like, these are really cool. So,
and they're usually pure white with like almost a rainbow fetlocks.
Mm. And they make a really good beer.
Yes, the Kirin beer from Japan is it's
the Kirin make it right.
And they have the Kirin creature on a logo, and no, it's not the Kirin that actually make it. I'm sorry.
No. the thing is, with the
Kirin, it all this time.
And the thing is, the Kirin picture that they have on it is only one version.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's it's similar variations throughout Asia, because Kitai Poi was the one who asked me to draw this. And he's talking about the different variations and how he loves them too, because I think it's the Qilin. I don't pronounce Chinese, but there's variants on it. So
of course, yes.
Anyway, I have rambled. Somebody else should have a turn.
I have not taken this one actually, so I guess I should probably have a bit of a ramble myself. Let's see. We're on mythical creatures. Okay. Yes. I'm trying to decide what my favorite mythical creature is, and I'm failing really badly.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard to pick one.
Do I have to pick one? I like all of them. They're all my babies.
As many as you want.
But which one do I start with is the question. Okay. No, I had a thought. It realized where it was. It left.
There's always the dragons. You
Yeah,
know
there
how
is
different they
always the
are
dragons.
in Eurocentric myths, rather than say, in my martial arts career, instead of a dragon being this like big thing you got to go defeat, Saint George and the dragon and all this kind of stuff, it was the dragon holding the pearl of wisdom. And when you got a certain level, or in the Taoist martial arts tradition, there isn't actually a dragon form, and you were picturing that holding of that pearl.
Right.
My spouse does more of dragon style than I do, and it's brutal, but it's so beautiful. But it's the treatment of the dragon as this kind of being of wisdom that's holding this pearl of wisdom, and kind of in this movement as you're going through is it's just amazing.
It really is. And I grew up, of course, being very, very, very white. I grew up with St. George and the Dragon, and like that was my first exposure to dragons, and I was just like, this is fascinating. Tell me more. And then I found out there were other dragon myths, and I'm like, this is fascinating. Tell me more.
Yeah, Green Augment, I like that idea. What point do we recognize dinosaurs? It's just science is dragons.
Come on, sauropods, let's go.
Okay, fair enough.
We're dino dragons. Like, come on, but no, really, there is a potential case for that. How do we know that there weren't some form of animal creature back in the day that somebody actually saw? Because we have all over the world, we've got similar images.
Yes.
And you have to think this must have gone back to some form of source.
Yeah.
There must have a similar thing.
A random pterodactyl or something of that nature flying around years after it should have been dead.
Well, in nature, we have like the bombardier beetle that can, put out really, really hot gases. Why couldn't it come from the mouth? It just. Yeah.
There's so much we don't know about nature. There's so many, think of all of the incredible amounts of space that we have yet to explore on our own planet.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, yes, we know what's in there, but what's in there?
4,000 years ago, what was there?
Yeah.
There is something to be said for that. There is a potential to question about it. Obviously not make any statements because we don't have the truth. We don't know.
We don't know.
But we can posit the question, what if? And that's another thing that mythology is really good for that we can't necessarily do on a daily basis. Yeah. If I say today, what if, Ogopogo in Lake Okanagan is actually some form of aquatic dinosaur? Well, first off, if you're not from BC, most of you, are going to be like,
what are you talking about?
Did Sava just stutter? Like, did you just? What's an Ogopogo? Like, is that some sort of weird children's story that got canceled in the 80s? Like,
I live on Okanagan Lake.
Yeah, nice. I'm there a lot. Yeah. But it's.
But Amy's probably going, what are you guys smoking over there?
Ogopogo is the Canadian Loch Ness monster.
Right.
That goes back to a lot of indigenous stories of there being a aquatic dragon-like creature in Lake Okanagan. Lake Okanagan being incredibly deep with a lot of underground tributaries and a lot of tunnels. And, so what if thousands of years ago, there you have an instigating incident.
Yeah.
There you have the ability to bring something in to more of a modern setting like we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with mythological creatures, the ones I didn't touch on much were the Middle Eastern ones. Like the phoenix.
Yeah, the phoenix is one. There is, interestingly enough, a phoenix-esque creature in Russian mythology and folklore known as the firebird. Very different creature. But
the firebird is also in North American indigenous. Mm-hmm. And the thunderbird.
Different firebird.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
But we do have a question on monsters. What about shifters? So that goes back to like the werewolves.
Yeah.
because they're considered mythological, but there are a lot of stories about them throughout Europe.
Yeah.
A lot of Slavic, a lot of kind of near the Caucasus, things like that too. And I think with some of those traditions, we can't necessarily, like, I know a lot of separation has been done because, you know, werewolves and vampires have kind of like, they don't frickin' sparkle.
No.
In the myths, like in the myths,
They're
sure, there's a
very
rewriting of it. Like they're not diamond skin in the myths. A lot of the original myths from that area of kind of the Slavic areas was basically, and I hate to say it this way, but somebody who lived their life so deplorably and they did so many sins and they were so awful and vicious a person that when they got down to hell, the demons went, dude, you're like one of us. Oh my God. Let's just, well, not oh my God, but you know, oh my somebody else. But like, let's put them back on earth because they're worse than we are.
Yeah, we don't want them here. They'll take over.
Yeah. Oh my, they'll take over. Like, dude, I worked really hard to be here. You know, like, so, you know, when you think of it from the original context, there is this idea of corpses that were of people so depraved that they were given a second, very brutal and very violent life.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of vampire myths originate out of Romania, if I remember correctly, and then spread across Europe.
And that too was more recent. It was an English woman who had gone with her husband into that area, and her husband was in the British military. But she had written down a lot of the folklore in, especially the Transylvanian region and other regions like that. And then she brought those folklore stories back to Britain, and then Bram Stoker got a hold of her book.
Oh, of course, naturally.
And wrote
That's where we have Dracula.
Yep.
And that's actually because it was the story of Vlad Tepes, or Vlad Dracul, who he was a military genius. The thing is he had his enemies on stakes. And yes, he would eat his meal in front of them because he's taunting them. But having the...
You want to take over my land?
Yeah, you want to take over my land? This is what's going to happen. And he left them... And the thing is, he left them out there for other people when they came in to go, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, don't tempt me.
Yeah, don't tempt me.
You want to play? This is how I play.
Yeah.
You know, and he historically, the historical figure stopped an invasory motion. You know, you could argue that. But hey, Kayetan, I could.
Yeah, there. Oh,
I could read it.
That's what I should have talked about.
I can read a little. It's in Polish. I could still read it a little.
Yeah.
Just a little. But yeah, you know, and so werewolves too, they were people that were too demonic to be demonic, like woo, in the original, in the OG kind of idea. But you know, that's the question about shifters. A lot of the times, sadly, they come from either a very animistic place, like you get, you know, shamans, you know, Sami and different kinds of animalistic cultures and animist cultures where they're kind of putting on that spirit of the deer or that spirit of the wolf for some form of ritual.
Yep.
Or you get something, if you're hearing scratching, it's Iroh. He's like, you're talking about animals. Come on, let me in.
The other thing too is when you're talking about werewolves, right? There are the evil werewolves, and then there are the ones that were considered to be protectors of villages.
Yeah, like there's one specifically, I think it was Irish, where the werewolf would bring fish and leave it on the windowsill.
Yep. It would go fish, deer, rabbits.
Yep.
Yep. But if you want to go into the indigenous peoples, we're not going to go into it too much, but what they call skinwalkers. But no, that's another one they say, don't go there.
Do not go there. Just no. It's like the other thing that we talked about where we said, just don't. Even worse, don't.
Yeah.
Just no.
Nobody's going skinwalker. Like yeah. There's a firm, like if you're looking for where is there a line?
That's it.
There's a line.
And I actually have done research into it, and I know why.
Yeah, from what I understand, yikes. Holy yikes.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. And I have not done a lot of research into it, so it's like the fact that I'm sitting here going, wow, okay, just no.
No.
Just no.
There's pain there.
Yeah.
You know, and
There's
I
a
think
lot of
too that's
pain, yeah.
something we have to recognize when we're asking questions about, do we tell this story? Do we not? You know, is it our story to tell? If there is cultural pain that's part of that, and
Don't
that's not just walk away.
Yeah, just
walk away. That's not your story. Like there's honest pain there, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We don't know whether or not there's pain in a story. You know, so sometimes it takes that sensitivity rate. It takes that kind of immersion in a culture to kind of feel that out. And I think that too, it makes certain stories, certain mythologies, and certain mythoses a little bit more difficult to go into, you know, especially if they are of a major religion. Certain major religions are easier to talk about, easier to kind of interplay with and build on than others, which kind of deserve the respect of being like, okay, you know what? You're there and I love you. I'm going to go over here.
And I'm going to take
else.
this moment to say a mass echo to all of us. Not you, not me,
Yeah,
just all of us.
we're gonna
we have
move
blabbed
on.
about this for far too long.
Yeah.
And we've got 3 other questions so far, so we should probably be moving on.
Yeah, okay, so
The first one was me, but it goes with the second one, so we can skip mine.
okay. So does something like
Nessie or
Loch Ness
Bigfoot?
monster, or Bigfoot, you know, those folklore-centric monsters require the same level of research as something from faith currently practiced? I would argue yes.
Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that the Bigfoot or Sasquatch, that's for North American.
Yes.
The Yeti for Asian, and the Urals, the Ural Mountains area,
especially Tibetan.
Yeah.
Yep. There's one in Africa and there's one in Australia. And I can't remember what they are, but they're all very similar.
Yes.
The only differences are like fur color, possible size. I mean, if I want to, I could probably look up the different types of Bigfoots, and we could go on this for hours.
But let's not.
Yeah.
Right.
We only
this is one of the areas that I like to look into.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like watching the hunting Bigfoot type TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and then you get Sasquatch as almost like, I don't know, you know, in BC, there are certain metaphysical stories and there are certain metaphysical authors that are talking about Sasquatch as a interdimensional or spiritual being, and not just as a physical cryptid, not just as a like, oh, it must be an ape species that we haven't met yet that are lost in the Pacific West Coast, because there's tons of unexplored forests in BC, Washington, and going down into Oregon. You know, it is for some people a spiritual conversation of something that is currently being investigated and practiced.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that requires research.
Yeah. And like Green Augment said, Australia is the Yowie.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And Fantasy goes, Bigfoot is a 3-hour show all on its own.
Yeah, it really is. Pin in that for next year, maybe.
Yeah,
cryptids.
Someone write it down.
Yes. Someone, not me. Write that down, Siobhan.
Hey,
cryptids.
I'm just going to the Writers Conduit Discord, future panels.
Cryptids. Yeah, and Fantasine says, as a kid in Washington, I determined Bigfoot was what was left of Neanderthal.
Possible.
Well, the thing is
there are theories.
There are theories that it's either they're maybe Neanderthal or Gigantopithecus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That survived.
Yeah, and I think when you combine those theories of a more scientific nature with the kind of spiritual aspect in other ways, you kind of have to look at it, because I think it's really easy for us to think, well, no, there's scientific theories about this, so if I go with the science, I'll be fine. But again, think about whether or not there are people who actively believe a certain thing.
And if you don't know, just look it up. Just see if there is.
Talk to somebody.
Because I didn't know
talking
until we started talking about this. I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, other types of
North
cryptids.
American.
How many people know about I'm gonna say it wrong, the Loch Ness monster in Okanagan Lake?
Ogopogo.
Ogopogo, thank you. I knew I was gonna say it wrong.
Think of a pogo stick. You go and pogo. You go
Okay.
and pogo stick.
I'll try to remember that.
Yeah. But yeah. Oh, I mean, I was raised, partially in British Columbia, and myths, legends of the Ogopogo. Every single time we went to Okanagan Lake, we would look for Ogopogo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
we'd be on a boat. Like, where is it?
There have been recent sightings, but the problem is there's no evidence, which is what makes it a cryptid.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the evidence that they had for Loch Ness was proven to be a fake.
Rude.
But that doesn't mean that the folklore isn't still there.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of the folklore around Ogopogo is based on the Okanagan Native Americans, the Okanagan Indigenous.
Yep.
So if you're going to start writing about it,
talk to them
make sure
first.
you talk to them.
Yeah. All right. And we have another question which probably will take up the remaining bit of our time. I don't know that we're going to get to inventing your own mythology and fiction. I'm going to propose that should be a topic for next year.
Yeah.
Its own show. Inventing your own mythology. Yes.
Let's do it. Start with cosmogony and work our way up to heroes.
Yes.
I mean, that's just it. I mean, that could be a long one too.
That could be a very long one. Okay.
It needs to be a workshop.
The next question, possibly the last question we're going to get to, is we've talked about a lot about monsters, but with your writings, you've added a twist to them. What were some of your favorite takes on the monsters you've written about?
I've already answered that one, so I only can let other people talk.
Well, we'll let Eli start this one.
Me? Okay.
You haven't started one yet.
That's true. I have not started one yet. Let me think for a second. Okay, so in my book Reaper, I did a take on the Grim Reaper, who is, in fact, a mythological creature. Or mythological being, or whatever you want to term them as. And I connected my Grim Reaper to the Cain myth. And I really like the way that I did that. And I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. I have lost my train of thoughts. Let's go to somebody else, like Safa. Let's go to Safa for a bit, and I'll come back to it if I get brains.
Okay. Now, I think my favorite take is something that is actually oncoming. It's coming in Book of Revels, which is the sequel to Son of Abel. It's coming out in November. And I introduce, and now this is, I'm going to use monsters as more of a mythological term and not as like a specifically like hot take monsters. Like did Saf just call angels monsters? No, but I go a little bit Abrahamic in part of one of the mythologies that I talk about in Judge of Mystics series. And I have angels as in the many wings, multiple-eyed wheels. And then they put upon themselves, like if you look at one too hard, there's a scene where one of my main characters, Lily, she's looking at Mika and she's like, she's looking and there's this non-binary person standing there who is visibly non-binary, wearing the flag as a lapel pin, non-binary person. And it's in her eyes, she's looking at Mika and they're morphing from this sort of like non-binary entity to the wheeled, winged, multiple eyes, angel that you see, one of the versions of an angel that you see within Abrahamic traditions. I love that idea. I love that idea of investigating angels as non-human entities, not meaning to be human. Yes, they could put on human clothes like we would put on a sweater, but that's not what they are. That's not what they do. That's not what they seem to be. So I really liked doing biblically accurate angels. And also there is going to be a future nod to the biblical creature, the same one that you see at the throne, in the throne room of God, with the 3 sets of wings and 4 different animal heads.
The seraphim.
Yeah, I'm going there. So angelology is something I've been wanting to do for so long. Hit me up, we can talk. I love it. But also too, just as a character and as a statement within my piece, it was important to, when the angels put on their human clothes, that it was as an agender individual, a individual without sexuality, without gender, because that's what it says. Source material. I'm sorry to kind of let's go back to the source material here.
What gender is this thing with lots and lots of eyes and many, many wings, and it's on fire for some reason?
There's lots of fire. They're taking coals and putting them in people's mouths, and somehow that's giving them wisdom. It's like, but really somehow it's burning away the I wish, if that was a thing and I could just put like an ember from a barbecue in my mouth for 5 seconds, and I would never put my foot in my mouth again, I would do it. But that's not true.
Yeah, because those embers that they're putting in your mouth are supposed to burn away the ignorance.
Yeah.
And so you have these creations within the story, and I'm using story in the context of mythology as we're stating right now, and not in the religious context. So I recognize there is a heavy religious context to this. It's one that I very intimately understand. Thank you. But within this story, within this mythology, concentrating on the fact that these angels, as much as we've seen, either you get the oh, look at this serene angel with flowing blonde hair and the beautiful feminine voice wearing all these layers, or you get Saint Michael and the dragon, with the sword and the spear and shield in hand, are these agender creations.
Yes.
These beings without form that we recognize as humanoid, that act and respond to things in a completely different way. And, however you view the work of Madeleine L'Engle does this too.
I love Madeleine L'Engle, the Stitch in Time series.
Yeah, the Stitch in Time series. There's actually a humanoid, lacking in humanoid form of angels. And it's shocking, and it's reverent, and it's crazy, and it's like, whoa, but I mean, come on, if you saw some flying bunch of wings with 72,000 eyes and a bunch of flaming wheels on it, I'm pretty sure, whoa, is the least of your reactions. I want to play
Run away.
I mean, for me, it's my take on the griffin.
Right.
Because my percivet do not speak. They will caw. They will mourn, right? They will, they speak through body language, and empathy, which is something you'll discover later in the series, is the fact that they're very empathic. So when somebody's showing fear, they're going to react to fear, which is what causes so many sprites to end up dying because of percivet encounters, because they're scared of them. So they react accordingly, like an animal would. If you show fear, you pray.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Instinct coming in.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Green Augment.
Yeah.
Sorry, that comment to Green Augment. Yeah.
Well, that's
not
just
afraid.
And an angel of heaven came among them. Yeah, that's just it, right? And I'm thinking of the birth story of Christ, right? And an angel of heaven came upon them and said, "Do not be afraid, for I bring great."
Because they're terrifying.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Do not be afraid.
I said, be not afraid.
Yeah.
Very
So,
pretty tidings.
Or maybe it was a don't be afraid. Just me.
Be not afraid.
I'm coming upon you as calmly as I can.
I'm good.
Sneaky, sneaky.
I promise I'm bringing you good tidings of great joy. But,
I'm not sure if we have somewhere else if there's any more panels after this, but it is a 15-minute.
Yes, it is 15 minutes until the end. We should probably go around because we sort of skipped the introductions. So we should probably go around and do some outroductions. So let's see here. Who do we want to start with while I'm getting Discord back up because I closed it earlier? Not me. How about Siobhan? I will grab links in just a second.
All right. Hi, I'm Siobhan the writer. I am a trans writer who is working on a series of novels called the Corrigenda Chronicles. I love mythology and utilize a lot of it in my writing, just not in the way you would expect. My pronouns are she, her, and you can find me at Siobhan the writer _Siobhan on Twitch, or you can find me on my World Anvil. Yes, thank you.
All right. And how about you, Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Winters Voss, also known as Shy Red Fox. I'm Shy Red Fox on Twitch, amywintersvoss.com, Amy Winters Voss on Twitter, Instagram, you name it. I wrote a book with some Japanese mythological creatures, kitsune, mostly kitsune for the first one, and then the world will expand. He just has to meet one. My book is called Rise, the Elemental Chronicles, and it's about a Yakuza who's trying to start over, and it's like nigh impossible for a gangster in Japan to start over. And he rescues a fox, and he doesn't know it's the little old lady who had it out for him, and he discovers her secret, and that's very, very beginning. So it's one little spoiler there, and it starts their adventure together and his chance at redemption. So that is Rise the Liminal Chronicles. So there you go.
Safa?
Hi, my name is Safa Brunel. I'm the author of 4 books and the editor of many. I focus my work academically on comparative religions and mythology, and I work in the cyberpunk and magic realism and mythology genres, almost exclusively in my own personal work. So I've got the Judge of Mystic series. Book 2 is coming out in November, and my cyberpunk series started with Neon Lieben, and that came out in August of last year. And the sequel to that is being written. I'm starting in a few days, and my goal is to bash it out during the Game of Tomes. I need to get at least 200,000 words, and I think I'm going to do it because I almost got that much last time. So you can find me at safaburnell.com and on all social medias and Twitch at Usurper Kings. Usurper Kings being my first book, which was a poetry collection based on the feminine through time. I myself identify as non-binary, so my pronouns are she, they. And we have a lot of interesting and great conversations coming around. So I would love to see you and read your work.
Yep. And I guess I should introduce myself. I am Eli Quake. I am the author of the Reaper Saga. Book 3 might be coming out soon. Yes, look for a Kickstarter for book 3 in August. I did not say this. It's secret. Oh, I just realized I could actually show off most of the cover right now if I felt like it. And probably will before we leave. But before that, right, you can find me at Eli Quake, or at www.eliquake, that's with a KWAKE.com. You can also find me at Eli Quake just about everywhere. You're obviously on my Twitch channel right now, so if you want to find me later, drop me a follow. Or not. I'm not your mom. Yeah. And yes, let's just give me 2 seconds. Quick, fill the space while I find the picture I'm looking for.
And make sure if you're on the Discord server, the Writers Conduit Discord server, there are links to all of us there. And if not, I'm sure there's going to be a mad panic in the next 5 minutes for us to start posting our links. So hit us up on Discord. I think all of us are there, seeing as how we were all talking to each other earlier on Discord. I know that actually, yes, all of us are on Discord.
Discord.
Various different channels.
I'm pretty sure every panelist is on Discord. Yeah. Otherwise, we would not be in Conduit.
Okay, here we go. This is the one that I was supposed to post earlier today and then never did. Yes, come back to find out next week what the book is called. Otherwise, you have seen the cover.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, and now I'm going to hide this behind literally everything else. There we go.
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
Yes,
that's going to be great.
Next week on my Twitter or on my stream, I will be talking about, look, I have a book cover. Guess what? That means there's going to be a book.
Yeah!
All right, and for now, I suppose we should get rating over to Writer's Conduit, because I think that's where we're supposed to go, right?
It is.
Yes, okay. Let me just...
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. We had
Thank you.
I hope you had lots of fun too.
If you have more questions, let us know, or at least bother me.
All of us, yeah.
Yes, bother all of us. I didn't want to speak for everyone, just in case one of us was like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I am so tired. Please no.
Oh no,
please give me a week. Please give me a week."
That is my raid call. Let the spark of creativity ignite.
Let the spark of creativity
be positive.
Go on over
and
here.
read myths. Lots of myths.
Yes, lots of myths.
Yes.
All right.
The more, the merrier.
More myths. But we are off screen now, and I'm going to go ahead and say good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you guys. This was fun. This was really fun.
I'm a little fuzzy on one thing though. Do we submit the VOD?
Yes.
Yes, I've got it recorded.
Are you sure? I'm just not. Do they want them? Is it too